This is early on, after doing the black line drawing and putting down the different colors, and I had no idea at the time that this was going to take me a lot longer than I thought. This one took long, and it took long because a lot of colors were used. I had to do a little bit here, a little bit there, so it was kind of piecemeal. I had to use smaller brushes, and again, I'm shooting for clarity in the backside because the front side skins are not as clear as I'd like them to be. So I want to see what I can do with this my second chance at it. And I'm going about it very carefully. Sometimes slowing down to a snail's pace. Sometimes so slow I'm just thinking about it. All I'm doing is thinking. I was getting to the point in this one where I was doing a lot of stippling. And again, stippling is when you're just kind of doing these dots. Although in my case, it's a lot of dots all at once. Usually I use a splayed brush. I would never stipple with just one dot at a time with a sharp brush. It just, to me, it doesn't make any sense. I like hatching though. Hatching is when you're doing the lines one after another. A lot of times they're parallel lines, not off. Sometimes they're not. Cross hatching is when the lines, crisscross each other. And then feathering is the kind of line that you naturally get with a brush where it tapers off. It starts thin and goes thick, or vice versa. And so you have all of these different types of lines. The only times that I think about doing dots are when I have a texture that I can make pretty quickly and easily with a splayed brush. And again, splayed means the hairs are all jumbled out. The brush got ruined because enough acrylic paint got accumulated in the ferrule. The ferrule is where the hairs are connected, and so it makes the hair splay out. And so the brush, when a brush is splayed like that, it's no longer useful for accuracy or for details or anything like that, but it has other uses. And I keep all of the ruined brushes. The only time I ever throw away a brush is when it's got so much acrylic paint in it that it's no longer a brush, it's all just plastic. And by that time you can't really do anything with it. It's more like a spatula, and so I just let it go. When I first started doing this kind of painting and I started doing reverse paintings, I tried to do them as simply as possible because I found out early that this was very difficult to do. You had to have a very different mindset. And the first 20 or so were complete messes. I wasn't at all happy with the results. And I would look up articles, look up what this kind of painting entailed. There were practitioners of it out there, and I would, you look it up online to find out what they were doing and what they recommended. And I didn't really get a lot of information about it. I mean, practical information as far as first you do this and then you do that. The only famous artists that I knew that were using it were two artists from the Harry Who. That's Carl Worsam and Jim Nutt. And they were doing it a long time ago. They were doing this back in the early 1960s. And they were painting on plexiglass, but they were also painting on, school and office supplies, these little, paper holders, report covers and things like that. And they're see-through. And so you're able to paint on them, do a reverse painting, you'd be able to flip it over and be able to see the backside, right? In the few comments that I've read about, I've read a few of their interviews, especially Jim Nutt, he would talk about this and about how the fact was that, he had to plan it all. He had to plan everything. They used to do these very cartoony images, very quirky and cartoony. And Jim Nutt would talk about how he had to plan it all because, there was no room for mistake, really. Because once you put that paint down, it's very difficult to get off. You can get it off in the first, minute or so if you spray a bunch of water and try to get it out that way. But once it's on there, that's it. It's not coming off it was that sort of thing where it was. I was very interested in doing it, but I didn't want to keep making, breaking eggs to try to get this omelet. So I ended up simplifying it and did it like that in a simplified manner for years. I don't know, several years where I just did the same basic thing in the back. I wasn't even following the acrylic skins, and then eventually I got back into the idea of possibly doing it, but this time doing it in a way where I had my acrylic skin and it was already done, and then I'd use that as a guide. So I'd almost be taking Jim Nutt's advice indirectly. So he said he had to plan them out, and I said, well, I don't want to plan these out to that degree. And it's true, and I don't. But once you've already done a successful or semi-successful painting on an acrylic skin, and you have the image in front of you, it's basically all planned out. So what you do is you go with the plan. You look at the plan that you have in front of you on the skin, and you just follow along. And that's when I picked up that way of working on the back sides. It started to make sense. It was still very difficult to do because there are a lot of ways it can go wrong. Like I mentioned, a lot of times it's colors. The colors are wrong. You don't notice it on the front side, but the way that they're reacting on the back, it's different, obviously. And one of the main reasons it's different, very different, especially when you're midway through, is a lot of the times you think that you're able to see the colors through because there are little open spaces that you can still see, but they don't matter as much as you think they did. And when you turn it around later and you try to look for those spaces that had that new color, they're not very visible. You'd have to really look around and see where they're at. There's a lot of things that you don't see on the other side unless you're turning it around constantly, which is not a bad idea. I'm turning it around here, but it's only to make sure that I'm within the lines, I'm coloring inside the lines and things like that. I can't look at the colors and compare them because that blue film is in the way. It's going to change everything, obviously. It's still difficult, but much easier than it was when I first started it. And as I've been doing it this way, I've been doing it this way now for 4 years, since 2017, where I'm copying what's happening on the back. And I found ways to basically do it where it makes sense and it's practical, it's not impossible or anything like that. It's been interesting and it's been getting better and better. I've been, in the year 2020, I've gotten some really positive results, things that when I look at them, I thought, oh wow, this has a future with me. This is the way I'm going to be going for some time to come, as far as I can see anyway. I looked up reverse paintings recently, a few months ago. I don't remember why. I think it was, I found something on Twitter, and they had mentioned it was a reverse painting, and I thought, oh wow, that's curious. It looks kind of old. When I think of reverse painting, I think of 20th century, because I think of the Harry Who, which was a mid-20th century art group of 5 artists from the Chicago area. And they all knew each other. They were friends and all that. And like I said, 2 of them were doing that. The other 3 were not. They were doing their other kinds of art. What made them all similar to one another was the fact that they were all doing very cartoony work, but very quirky at the same time. So it's not cartoony as in something you might find on the Sunday pages or on comic books. It was really crazy, weird stuff, which appeals to me a lot today. And so 2 of those artists, Carl Worsam and Jim Nutt, were working with reverse paintings. So I just assumed that it was one of those things that started in the 20th century because most of the people that do it today, they do it on plexiglass, which is what I do. I use it with acrylic glass, basically. I found out in this one Twitter entry, there were these old reverse paintings from hundreds of years ago, and what they did them on glass. I don't know how thick the glass was, but glass can break. But most of the time, these paintings were on other fixtures, so I found a lot of them on clocks. Those old grandfather clocks. These would have parts of the clock. You have the face of the clock, and then you have the pendulum that swings back and forth. And then a lot of times, some of these clocks would have a painting of a landscape or something like that under the clock face. And those were usually reverse paintings. So they didn't paint on the surface so that you had the painting, coming outward. They painted on the back so that you could see through it and get this image. Paintings that actually have a good degree of control, and they have shades of dark and light, which I thought was I didn't think it was impossible to do, but I think it's very limited and at the same time very, very difficult to pull off. They're still kind of limited. If you look at the paintings, you can tell that they're not as as sophisticated as a non-reverse painting when you're trying to get those shades. But I was pretty surprised at the kind of control that they were able to do, and that people were doing this at all. Why would people do a reverse painting on a sheet of glass? Is what I was asking myself, and I still don't really know the answer. But it's interesting because it's got a tradition. I don't know how old the tradition is, but it seems to be at least a couple of 100 years old. And you've got some paintings that obviously needed to be planned out. Like Jim Nutt had mentioned in his interview, you had to plan these out. And they must have planned it out because they were able to get, semi-realistic results with what they were doing. And I found it really interesting. So again, if you look at this image, it's going to be influenced by comic books. There's 3 images. They're all horizontal, so there's one on top of the other. There's a very thin one up at the top. There's a slightly thicker one under that, and then the thickest one is under that. The first 2 are landscapes, and the last one is an interior view. They don't really have any direct relationship with one another, but because they're all in close proximity with each other, they do now have a relationship. If you like what you see, then like and subscribe to Zap-stract Kinetics. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to new videos. Follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/Ray Armenteros. That's REYARMENTEROS. And on Instagram at instagram.com/Ray_Armenteros. That's REY_ARMENTEROS. Thanks for watching.